So it was, dear viewer, that I found myself on the horns of a dilemma as someone who has loved Flash Gordon in many different incarnations, but most especially the Dino De Laurentiis film, but as someone who has had mixed results with Savage Worlds. Love it for Deadlands. Everything else hasn't gone so well, though I will say it's a better system for Rifts than Palladium is, but that's not exactly a high bar. Now, is it? But I've found myself stung a couple of times that I have bought Savage Worlds material. The Solomon Kane book, for example, it's a good resource, but it's mostly adventure stuff, which I always feel is a bit of a waste of space in these kind of books. And kinda so it is with Flash Gordon. To one extent or another. But when I do buy the Savage Worlds books, I kind of buy them in the same way a lot of people used to buy GURPS books, in that they're a useful resource for doing whatever it is in a different system entirely. So there's that, I suppose. Now, as a source book, this is a kind of syncretic mix of many different versions of Flash Gordon, but largely conspicuously absent is the cartoon version. That just doesn't seem to be particularly present. It wasn't exactly the best the best version of Flash Gordon, but it had certain elements that it did better than others. I think it didn't shun away from the World War II original setting, the robots and things that Ming used, because you can't be seen to be killing human beings or living aliens. You know, those were quite cool. The plots were more convoluted and ongoing. The sequences with the rocket ships were cool. But that seems to be largely conspicuously absent in here. The Dino De Laurentiis film is reasonably well represented, because we get a nice little introduction from Sam Jones. We get some stat blocks and things and interpretations that are closer to that movie than other versions, but the lion's share is given over to the original comic strip, and other elements have been kind of bound together in it. Now, to modernise, you know, God love it, the original comic strip, but it's really dated, and the naming conventions and things for a lot of the characters and so on, you know, they're grown worthy. You know, it feels like it's one of few properties that needs an update, and which has been interpreted in a whole bunch of different ways over the years, told and retold. Even that execrable Sci-Fi Channel series is mentioned and covered a little bit in here. But the RPG fails to make itself its own thing and remains deeply rooted in the comic strip, which is good if you're a purist, I suppose. But the one consistent thing in Flash Gordon has been change, and it feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity. But then again, if it had been updated in today's market, it probably would have lost a lot of what has made each incarnation fun and good. So it's swings and roundabouts. If you want to read something that has a more modern sensibility to it, and yet is rooted in this kind of science fiction, the short-run comic series Ignition City by Warren Ellis, and to a lesser extent more hard science, Ministry of Space, same person, is also good. And if I were to write a pulp space game, Ignition City would probably be my sort of starting point. taking a lot of ideas from the old pulp serials and so on and mingling them together in a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen sort of way, but then in addition bringing that modern sensibility to it in the same sort of way that Deadwood brought a modern sensibility to the cowboy genre. I'm talking a lot around the book, but not that much about the book, aren't I? Look, it's a source book. You need Savage Worlds separately to play. Quick start rules on this should barely be enough, but you probably need the core book. I think it would have been better to have a summary of the rules in here somewhere, so you don't have to carry around multiple books if you're somewhat au fait with the system. But hey, it is what it is. It's fairly complete in terms of stuff, races, and so on from all the different versions of Flash Gordon. And there's the tools there to make things that you think are missing from, say, the cartoon version as well. Equipment, armor, super science, psionic abilities, rocket ships. Yeah, it's got everything you need. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it does look like everything is scaled pretty much correctly and will have the right feel. And there's certainly the sensibility in the system. I mean, in Savage Worlds anyway, but particularly with the couple of tweaks they've got here to play it in that bombastic, heroic way. And it's fairly exhaustive if your main frame of reference is the comic strip, and if your main frame of reference is the film or the film serials or the cartoon, then the expanded material in here can make things much bigger and better. But personally, I would use it as a source book for making my own spin, my own version, and would do something different with it. In fact, I will be this weekend, time of recording. I'll be running Starblazer Adventures on the basis of that Ignition City sort of style of play, but I might take a few ideas from in here as well to run it. That would be Fate, not Savage Worlds, but yeah, there you go. Yeah, all the different kingdoms, all the main movers and shakers are taken. The campaign setting obviously runs into a problem in that Flash and Dale and Zarkov and Voltan and Barin and Thun and other rebellious characters, obviously in the mainline story in the comic or the film or whatever, they've already won, and those heroes will overshadow anything that your heroes might do. So it might be better to go for a sort of retelling of the story from the start with the player characters, rather than having them exist in the same world as Flash and Zarkov and so on, or setting it much later, a kind of resurrection of Ming and him taking the world back over and threatening Earth again, something like that. In the comic strip, as compared to the film, the kingdoms of Mongo are different places on the actual planet of Mongo, whereas in some other versions, particularly in the film version, it's each moon is its own kingdom, which I think in a lot of ways is better and more interesting, but it would be extremely easy to put together different make each kingdom its own moon, maybe even make Mongo just a larger moon orbiting some gas giant, some rogue gas giant that moves through the solar system or close to the solar system, or whichever way you want to go around it. But yeah, there's a lot here that's not going to be familiar to you if you're not familiar with the comics and which can be mined for ideas. I just really don't think playing it straight is the way to go. You want to mix things up. Now, it does have a plot point campaign, which to me is a bit of a waste of space, and does feel a bit more film inspired than anything else. But to me, this is just a whole bunch of wasted space that could have gone for a reiteration of the rules, quick start, and maybe some hints and tips upon tailoring what is here to playing within the comic strip universe, or the film universe, or the film serial universe, or the cartoon universe, or the Sci-Fi Channel serial universe. God knows why you'd want to do that. So that's wasted opportunity, wasted space to me. It's not as bad as in the Solomon Kane book, but it's still pretty bad. We have a nice bestiary. Yay, boarworms. No, father, not the boarworms. And a whole bunch of stuff. Again, the naming conventions and so on are cheesy, but then it's never really explained how all the different denizens of Mongo can communicate and how they speak in English and, and all the rest of it. Anyway, there are several suggestions in here how that might be gotten around. But if it's some sort of technological telepathy or whatever that's fostering understanding, that might help explain why people have cheesy names, because your brain is interpreting them in a way that you understand. So Queen Desira, that may sound cheesy and horrible, but that's just your brain interpreting what her name actually is. Things like that. So there's a way around that. But yeah, we got plenty of monsters, plenty of vehicles, plenty of rocket ships, plenty of NPCs. Plenty of stuff here. Oh, and there are dwarves, so if you want to play the little guys with the rapiers from the film, you absolutely can. That's not a problem. So no Clytus though. No Clytus. I'm very disappointed. Clytus is my absolute favourite. Shouldn't be too hard to work up stats for him though. So yeah, I mean, if you're a Flash Gordon fanatic, as I am, then it's worth it. It reeks of missed opportunities to me. But as a resource for making your own tailored campaign to your own sensibilities, your own ideas, and so on, I think there's plenty to recommend it. But it's not going to be for everyone. And I'm not convinced that Savage Worlds makes a good generic system. Unfortunately, I know people will disagree with me. It has its lovers, but I'm just not one of them, really. Generic systems often run into problems, and I don't know if this is customized enough for the setting. But your mileage may vary. You're allowed to like things. This is just my point of view. So, in terms of style, I really like the cover and the few occasions on the interior where they've done their own art. Right? But there's not enough of it. I understand why it would be cheaper and easier to use the comic book illustrations, but they haven't particularly stood the test of time, and I'm not sure that relying on their use was a fantastically good idea in terms of presentation. But it will have kept the cost down. So there's that. Layout is fine, reasonably easy to browse and read through. That's all good. The writing is easy enough to read and to process. So in terms of style, high 3 or low 4. It's nothing massively remarkable. If more of the art had been like the cover and the few interior illustrations rather than the comic strip, More definitely a 4, like a mid 4 or a high 4, but it's not. And the reproduction comic strips really show their age in modern printing and modern format. So let's stick with 3 for style. In terms of substance, there's some wasted space, but it's a fairly complete, gameable record of the Flash Gordon universe in its various forms. So it's only really the wasted space and the lack of advice on how to tailor the content that brings it down. So a mid 4 for substance. So that's 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. If you're a Flash Gordon nut or a pulp fiction nut, then it's definitely worth a buy. For anyone who isn't a pulp and Flash Gordon nut, you probably don't need it, to be honest. For me, it's a mineable resource for doing something a bit more like Ignition City, and I guess we'll see how that goes. Zang.
Hi, I'm Skip Breakfast, and you're watching Newsload. We're getting reports of a new card game which purports to make fun of the political and social hellscape in which we find ourselves, somehow turning this into a fun pastime for groups of slightly drunken friends to try and outdo each other. But there's one important question on everyone's lips: just how exactly do you play?
Switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man. The Santa Claus of the subconscious. You say it. You even think it. You can have it.